I'm going to go ahead and read a little bit from a novel that's called Rust on the Allegheny. And it takes place, when I wrote it to be Oil City. But I changed all the names kind of at the 11th hour to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. So, but the reason I want to read this specific chapter, and then I may skip ahead a little bit, is because it takes place outside of a local theater. A local Art Deco theater with an amazing front that kind of makes you wonder what it's doing in this little town. And it happens to be that building right across the street from us right now. So this chapter takes place. The way the story goes is that we see this building in the modern day, and then it flashes back to 1939. And so this is the chapter that takes place in 1939 in a city that I call Latonia City, Pennsylvania, which is, like I said, very much based on Oil City. Beneath the relentless sun of a cloudless summer morning, 9-year-old Nathaniel McCulloch stared up at the smiling stone mask carved into the high corner of the Derrick Theater. It was supposed to represent comedy, but to Nat, the beaming, slack-jawed face looked more like it had been thumped over the head with a billy club too many times. At the tweet of the traffic officer's whistle, Nat took off. He was quite practiced in the art of cutting a path of least resistance through a throng of foot traffic. His run was all business, save for a series of customary hops to clear the silver seams of the old streetcar rails. One couldn't be too cautious about observing such rituals. His hopping, however, proved too rambunctious for the liking of a few fellow pedestrians. "Slow down, you little cuss, or I'll..." The source of the oath, a clean-shaven, gentlemanly-looking fellow in a derby hat, was carrying an umbrella despite the fact that there hadn't been a drop of rain in weeks, and today's weather wasn't looking any different. And that umbrella, previously employed as a walking stick, was now raised off the ground and poised to strike or poke at Nat. But Nat sidestepped the objector, ducked behind a heftier wayfarer, and weaved a slalom course through the rest of the men in suits and hats mass migrating across the brick-laid street. Arriving on the theater side of East First, Nat stopped and closed his eyes, savoring the momentary respite from the heat that was provided by the shade of the cathedral-like Derrick at this time of the morning. When he reopened his eyes, the sad-looking face carved on the other side of the Derrick seemed to be looking straight down, right at him. He would have been lying if he'd said that he didn't find that one just a little off-putting. The copy face may have looked smack silly, but there was nothing amusing about that tragedy face's elongated, inhuman proportions, creating an expression of horror, the likes of which Nat had only ever seen on the faces of innocent bystanders in comic books, just before a mad scientist pulled the lever. Behind him, the traffic cop blew his whistle again to order foot traffic to come to a halt. Then came a second, longer whistle, this one followed by the chugging pops of countless miniature explosions powering hundreds of pistons in dozens of internal combustion engines, and the street traffic resumed. It was at this point that Nat realized his friend Dick was no longer behind him. Looking back, he spotted his partner in crime standing on the curb. He had his hands folded behind his back and his head bowed in deference, receiving a firm scolding from the same umbrella-wielding gentleman who'd reprimanded Nat. Dick evidently hadn't had the heart to ignore the man, who was presently spiking the tip of his umbrella against the bricks with a clack to punctuate an impassioned point. Dick took his tongue lashing like a good soldier, and when the seminar was complete and the umbrella-wielding defender of justice satisfied, Dick responded with a quick, "Yes, sir," and jogged over to join Nat in front of the theater, a building that was only a few years older than they were. Dick paused to push a handful of perspiration from his forehead up and over his scalp, an unsophisticated but effective means of styling his straight brown hair, then jabbed a thumb toward the double doors of the Derrick Theater. "How early do you think Gid shows up for his show?" he said, the brief inconvenience in the crosswalk already forgotten. You think he's in town already? Nat made a face. Of course not. The show isn't for 2 days. Big stars don't arrive early. Some of them do a different show every night, in a different city every night, or even 2 shows in one day. 2 shows in one day, said Dick doubtfully. Yeah, said Nat. Probably. I bet. Nat, too, ran a hand over his head to try to flatten a mass of unruly, curly dark hair that was in dire need of shearing. It was so thick that once, several hours into a school day, Nat had scratched his head and felt something hard, which had turned out to be a comb from that morning. Something had distracted him halfway through tending what his mother sometimes called his rat's nest, and he'd abandoned the task mid-stroke, tool and all. He had extricated the comb like King Arthur and slipped it into his back pocket in the middle of a math lesson. To his knowledge, not a soul had noticed. He'll pull up in a big private car, said Nat, right before the show starts, not a minute sooner than he needs to. What if the car breaks down? Said Dick. What, you think they'd start the show without him? Nat scoffed. Gid Rust is the show. People would wait for him all night if they had to. Dick nodded. Although he was a nervous boy and a few inches short for his age, he was not submissive by nature, far from it. Around the schoolyard, it was generally regarded as unwise to challenge this barrel-chested, thickly forearmed youth. Nevertheless, he usually deferred to Nat, as most of the boys did. In fact, it was only recently that Nat had noticed how other boys in class seemed to gravitate around him almost automatically. A teacher had once referred to Nat as having born leadership qualities, although Nat didn't quite know what that meant. It was not something that he sought after, but for some reason situations just seemed to fall in place with him at the center. And when the time for decisions to be made or judgments to be passed came, the heads always seemed to turn toward him, which was never a good time to discover an errant comb in your hair. In this case, however, it was only prudent for Dick to take Nat's word for it, because when it came to Gid Rust, Nat was the known authority on the subject. You think he'll play when the Saints go marching in? Said Dick. Yeah, but I bet he does, down by the riverside first, said Nat, on account of the theater being so close to the riverfront and all. Dick crinkled his nose. Isn't that a church song? Not when Gid the Great plays it, said Nat proudly. If you had it your way, said Dick, he'd play Happy Birthday to You. Nat chose to neither confirm nor deny this claim, and stepped forward to get a closer look at the display case in front of the derrick's doors. Secured under glass was a black and white paper playbill. It read, Gideon Rust, in person, the great trumpeter and his world-famous jazz band, one night only at the luxurious Derrick Theater, Latonia City, Pennsylvania, Saturday, July 23rd, 1939. In person, thought Nat, here. His stomach did jumping jacks at the thought. He just about worn the needle clean through the grooves of the 78 up at Pastel Records of Gid playing the Tiger Rag. More than once, old Brzezinski had to remind his employees to kick that darned McCullough kid out of the darned listening booth if there's a cue. And at home, one of Nat's prized possessions was a pamphlet of sheet music for Dinah, as played by Gid, swinging, quick-stepping, and blisteringly fast. Nat's sisters had long tired of hearing him clumsily attempt to nail down the intro on his second-hand cornet, and now the legend himself would be here. The Rust Man, Gid the Great, coming to play a show, and on Nat's birthday, no less. What if Gid really did play Happy Birthday to You? He wouldn't, Nat quickly reminded himself, but just as quickly cracked a grin, imagining what those notes would sound like coming off of Gid Rust's horn. End on a high C and blow the roof off the joint, probably. It was a crazy idea, and then Nat got an even crazier one. He turned to Dick. You think we could get in there? Dick shoved his thumbs into his pants pockets and rocked back on his heels, shaking his head. An amused man of the world addressing some foolish young dreamer. Your old man got some money squirreled away that I don't know about? Because I hear the tickets ain't cheap. Hey, brainless, can't you read? Nat pointed toward the red paper banner that had been supplemented to the signage. slapped over the lower portion of the playbill. Sold out. Nat lowered his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. He leaned in close and said, "I didn't mean with a ticket." Any lingering traces of amusement were quickly drained from Dick's face. He started to say something, but Nat cupped a hand over the boy's mouth before he could get a word out. Cautiously, Nat glanced up and down the sidewalk, as if expecting to find a cop, a PI, or J. Edgar Hoover himself eavesdropping on two 10-year-olds on a Thursday morning on a street corner in Midwestern Pennsylvania. "Not here," Nat hissed under his breath. "Follow me," and he took off running. Now, if you indulge me for just a moment longer, I want to skip ahead to the chapter where they do sneak into the theater. Spoiler alert, but they do make it in. So this is from later on in the story. It seems appropriate since we're right here in the shadow of the building. In the 15 minutes or so after When the Saints Go Marching In ended, during which Gid, Rust, and his Hot Six played swinging, lightning-fast renditions of the songs that had been spinning on record players across Latonia City all week, what struck Nat most about this larger-than-life figure was that his music was only part of the show. The man was an all-around entertainer, teasing the crowd, goofing around with the other musicians, one moment playing into expectations by staying almost mathematically true to the melody of a well-known tune. The next moment, defying every presupposition and stomping his foot against the stage like a madman as he launched into a blistering, rising and falling avant-garde solo. At times, he would stand with his fingertips poised over the trumpet valves, looking out at the crowd as if to say, "Should I do it?" and prompting shouts and hoots of encouragement. When the other members of the Hot Six soloed, Gid danced and clapped, sometimes pulling astounded faces as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. And at one point, chasing the clarinetist in a circle while he was trying to solo as if demanding that he stop showing him up. But when he soloed, there was no playing around about it. His spine went straight as a board, and he seemed to grow several inches taller than his normal height. His shoulders shifted back and went rigid and square, and everything in him seemed to freeze in place, except his flying fingers and the rapidly inflating and deflating air sacs that seemed to extend from his cheeks all the way down to the collar of his shirt. Nat, Dick, and Art didn't dare make a sound. So close were they to the spectators in the upper rows. In fact, none of them had uttered a single word since sneaking into the projectionist room, and they had only been snapped from their spellbound reverie between songs long enough to exchange silent, disbelieving looks at one another. Presently, the audience applauded the conclusion of Beale Street Blues, and Gid laughed wildly at himself and at them. Then he stepped up to the microphone, and the crowd quieted. "Now this next number is one of the good old good ones," he said in his gravelly New Orleans accented voice. "It's one of my favorite tunes, and tonight we're really going to swing it. I bet you've all heard this one before, but I'm sure you've never heard it like you're going to hear it tonight." As he spoke, he removed his suit jacket, revealing a shirt soaked in sweat from the collar to his belt line. "This is one hot summer evening, folks, and it's about to get a whole lot hotter in this joint, because we're taking a trip to Carolina. It's Dinah. I like it. Let's swing, cats, swing. Look out there." It was during the resulting round of applause, raised in approval of Gid's song choice, while Gid was in the process of sending his suit jacket spinning through the air back toward the rear of the stage, that the yellow beam of an electric flashlight from the theater floor below fell full upon the faces of the three boys in the projectionist room. "Hey you," called a voice. "Up there," someone said. All those heads that had gone so long without turning toward the boys now turned all at once to look straight at them. "Busted," hissed Art. "Hit the bricks," said Nat. "We're dead," yelled Dick. Gid and the Hot Six paid no mind. As the three boys abandoned their illicit balcony seating, the drummer slammed the snare to start a quick-stepping 8-to-the-bar beat. The rest of the band came in like a rocket, launching into the fastest-moving rendition of Dinah that Nat had ever heard. The piano pounded, the clarinet bawled, the trumpet soared, and the boys bolted. Gone was the caution with which Nat, Dick, and Art had previously observed. Nat took a running leap for the door. Dick, in a less successful imitation of the move, collided with a pile of film reels that toppled with a series of cymbal-like crashes. Nat was first to the door. He threw it open and took off down the hall. At the far end, two young men in red vests and matching trousers were engaged in a frantic conversation, but at Nat's sudden appearance, their bodies tensed like a couple of cats catching sight of a rabbit. "There," one of them said. "Hurry up, Dick," Nat yelled. In the wake of Art's desperate appeal came a round of crashes from the projectionist room, followed by Art and Dick tumbling out of the door, just as Gid's voice called over the mic, "Oh, Dinah, anyone find her in the state of Carolina? If there is a you know her, show her to me." It was a race for the exit, the second door on the right, Nat reminded himself, between the three boys and the two young men in vests, and Nat was faster. He flung the door open, waited long enough for Dick and Art to pass through, then jumped into the room just before his pursuers were within arm's reach of the knob. He threw the deadbolt, and not with a snare beat to spare. The knob jiggled back and forth, and the door jumped on its hinges. "Open up in there," a voice demanded. Nat, laughing wildly, replied, "Dinah got them Dixie eyes blazing. How I love to sit and gaze into the eyes of Dinah Lee." Come on, let's go," Nat shouted, already at the top of the fire escape. "My shoe! I lost my ever-loving shoe!" Dick protested, hopping toward the window. Nat, meanwhile, had broken into full scat. "Oh, baby, every night, why do I shake with fright? Oh, 'cause my dynamite, changing minds about babadoo zip zip zoo-wee." With Art's help, Dick made it out the window and tumbled, ass over teacups, into the fire escape on the other side. "Doo-doo-wah, wanted a China babe," Nat sang as he practically leaped out the window. "I would hop an ocean liner, babe. Doo-doo-zee, doo-doo-zum, yes, yes." The police cruiser that had been parked in the light of a street lamp was no longer there, and the alleyway below was empty. But Nat's rope and flour sack grappling hook was also gone. A dead giveaway that someone had indeed discovered their instruments of intrusion. Throwing all caution to the wind, Nat grabbed the railings of the fire escape and threw his full weight forward in a jump to the far end of the suspended stair. The stairway pivoted and dropped like an elevator with a cut cable, and the three boys screamed as they rode it all the way down. No sooner had the bottom step bounced against the bricks with a teeth-jarring clang than Nat leaped free and took off running down the alley toward Warren Street, steering far clear of the main entrance to the theater. With any luck, they would be across the bridge before any ushers, police officers, or deputized marshals conscripted in stalwart defense of justice against concert crashers ever made it around to the alley. "Oh, Dinah," Nat intoned to all of Latonia City beneath the sky of July stars. "Anyone finer?" "McCulloch, you're nuts," Dick vowed as he ran off-kilter with a shoe on one foot and only a sock on the other. "Did you see their faces?" laughed Art. "Aces, golden aces." "State of Carolina," Nat sang out. "Yeah, if there is any more, then I'd like to have you show it to me. Dinah, yes, Dinah, oh babe, Dinah Lee."